Last Friday, the House passed the Department of Defense Appropriations Act to the tune of $831.5 billion. It mostly fell along partisan lines. Republicans squeaked it out in advance of their massive recess. Again, they're not going to be back in office until September because they don't want to vote on the Epstein files. Most Democrats voted against this massive appropriations defense spending bill. But it did, again, 221 to 209. 3 Republicans opposed it. 5 Democrats joined the GOP. 2 interesting tidbits. One of the people who opposed it was Marjorie Taylor Greene, and one of the people who also opposed it was Richie Torres. And Richie Torres, you'd imagine, is like all gung-ho about military aid and military spending, even if and when it includes spending for Israel, which it always does. And this defense appropriations bill was no different. The biggest news, of course, is that within the defense appropriations discussion, there was an amendment that was introduced by worst person you know who's making a good point, Marjorie Greene.
Would strike $500 million in funding for nuclear-armed Israel's missile defense system. And it's important to phrase it that way. Israel is a nuclear-armed nation, which is very capable of defending themselves, and they have been proving that so as we've watched on the world stage. The U.S. already provides Israel with $3.8 billion annually in foreign aid. $3.8 billion, that's a lot of money. Additionally, the April 2024 security supplemental included $8.7 billion for Israel. That is nuclear-armed Israel. And during the recent 12-day war, the U.S. used 15 to 20% of our terminal high-altitude area defense missiles stockpiles defending nuclear-armed Israel, which cost us over $800 million. The $500 million provided in this bill will fund Israel's, that is nuclear-armed Israel's, missile defense system, the Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow system. Yet Israel is a nuclear-armed nation. That's a pretty big deterrent for any of their enemies. Any nation that has a nuclear bomb has the greatest threat against their enemies. U.S. aid typically accounts for 15 to 20% of Israel's defense budget, even though Israel, nuclear-armed Israel, has universal health care for their citizens and subsidized college for their citizens. They're able to provide that. However, here in America, we're $37 trillion in debt. My amendment to strike $500 million in foreign aid will ensure an America First Department of Defense. And that is exactly what we need, and we haven't had for a very long time.
Okay. I let her cook a little to really, sink into this. Could she say nuclear-armed Israel one more time? Nuclear-armed Israel. She made sure to hit that point. She's kind of like, she's kind of biting off the old Dave Smith libertarian apple here when Dave Smith pointed out on Piers Morgan that, yes, Israel has nukes. Now, what's funny is that Marjorie Greene is sort of implying that why don't they just use nukes? Or nukes should be enough of a threat and a deterrence. And specifically, again, this was an amendment to eliminate the $500 million for the Iron Dome, which is a missile defense system that the United States props up. It's a missile defense system the United States pays for and supports every single year. I think it either included in the $3.8 billion annually or separate from it. But it's a vote that has actually been a litmus test around where, specifically for progressives, on where you stand when it vis-a-vis U.S. military aid for Israel. I want to name a couple things about this speech and this amendment. Number one, notice how she didn't say Palestinians who are dropping dead as we speak, starving to death, who are truly like, it feels like a final stage of this just endless ethnic cleansing and genocide. I don't want to say that because I do think we have to fucking rise the up the way we did under Biden. But I know that the space and the room to really resist feels a lot smaller. But I just want to name how dire things are. Notice she doesn't actually talk about that because she doesn't care. This is someone who doesn't really care about Palestinians. This is someone who is an open Islamophobe. She's an open racist. She's talked about Sharia law taking over. That is not her angle. The unspoken angle might actually be that she's an anti-Semite deep down, Jewish space lasers, etc. But the substance of what she's saying kind of rings true, right? Why do we need to give Israel more money? Let's stop giving Israel so much money. They don't need this. We already give them $3.8 billion a year. We don't even have health care here. I mean, you've got this sort of like vague socialist for dumbasses, line in there. You got the like, oh, baby, it's almost working. It's almost happening. Now, this amendment was put forward in this defense bill, and it did not pass, resoundingly did not pass. But notably, a few Democrats actually voted for it. One Republican only, Thomas Massie, again, the only Republican, also to vote against the massive spending bill / tax break / Medicaid crusher of a big fugly bill, but also Representatives Rashida Tlaib, Representative Ilhan Omar, Representative Summer Lee, and Representative Al Green, a man who wants to impeach Donald Trump on the basis of Gaza, like over his Gaza policies, a man who stood up and shouted and chanted down Donald Trump to his face while, Trump was speaking at the State of the Union or whatever, so-called State of the Union. But here you have, 4 Democrats joining, Marjorie Greene to say no more money to Israel in this time of genocide, in this time of starvation. And yet it is significant that AOC was not one of those people. And granted, AOC, of course, did vote against the larger defense appropriations bill in and of itself. So by no stretch of the imagination would this be a vote that would actually have legs or go anywhere. It's very much a symbolic vote. But that symbolism matters. I want to say that symbolic vote matters, even and when the person who's introducing it might be as distasteful and awful as Marjorie Greene. I think there is a way to vote for this amendment to say, hell no, no more money to Israel. Not in this time, not against international law, not when they're systematically starving people, not when they are in violation of however many international laws, not when there are arrest warrants out for Benjamin Netanyahu. Absolutely not. And also say, that being said, I do not support where this person is coming from. And I think they're bad faith and sus, totally sus. But I will work together with this person if they're serious about taking money away from a genocidal state. That is not what AOC did. In fact, she wrote this on Twitter. She said, Marjorie Taylor Greene's amendment does nothing to cut off offensive aid to Israel, nor end the flow of U.S. munitions being used in Gaza. Of course, I voted against it. What it does do is cut off defensive Iron Dome capacities while allowing the actual bombs killing Palestinians to continue. I have long stated I do not believe that adding to the death count of innocent victims to this war is constructive to its end. That is a simple and clear difference of opinion that has long been established. I remain focused on cutting the flow of U.S. munitions that are being used to perpetuate the genocide in Gaza. So I understand in part what she's saying, right? She's saying, look, the missile defense system is already there. It's been shooting down, missiles that have come from Iran. Let's be honest, though. Iran, Lebanon, Syria, countries that have been attacked by Israel, they don't have this missile defense system. Are they entitled to a missile defense system? Should we be funding a missile defense system for those countries if we believe in peace and ending the death of innocent civilians, which Israel has contributed to? You see what I'm saying? Secondly, she's doing the thing that Joe Biden did, which was trying to distinguish between offensive weapons and defensive weapons, as if they could be distinguished. I mean, Israel's entire genocide is premised on the idea that it is defensive. Not that it is offensive. They are defending their right to exist. That's why they have to starve and maim and destroy refugee camps with children sleeping in them. That is their position. So effectively, you're echoing their position, hook, line, and sinker, and the propaganda worked on you. The liberal Zionists, whomever they are, who are in AOC's ear, likely J Street, who are convincing them that yes, the occupation is bad, but you can't get rid of aid to Israel and they need to defend itself. And Israel has the right to defend itself. Sure, but with its own money. Sure, but let them do it on their own. I mean, this is just sort of an exercise for me in cowardice. And the reason I say cowardice is because Summer Lee stuck her neck out. Summer Lee's been in office for one term. Summer Lee just won her second election, but she is a far more vulnerable candidate. She does not raise the kind of money that AOC raises. She does not sit comfortably and safely from AIPAC, who has absolutely tried to take her down. You've got obviously Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, who ever since being elected have been in the crosshairs of all kinds of hatred, Islamophobic attacks, have been singled out over and over again by Marjorie Greene herself. And they voted for it. Because again, and I'm reminded of sometimes the votes that Bernie Sanders has taken and bills that he sponsored along with Rand Paul. Because when there is something very concrete to achieve, that they're seeing this as a strategic move, right? Even if the strategy is simply being symbolic. Now, I want to name that this is very different than inviting Marjorie Greene on your show and glazing her up and down and going on Charlie Kirk and glazing him up and down and saying, why can't we just work together? Why can't we just have a beer? No. There's real legislation on the table. There's real actual things that could be happening. Yes, it's symbolic, but these are real legislators. So don't mistake me for, there is a way to say, I vote for this, but I do not endorse who is actually introducing this amendment, right? I see this as a tool. I don't support hook, line, and sinker everything that this person has said. No, I don't think we need to break bread and come together, but I will take this vote because we need to stop by any means necessary what is happening in Gaza right now. And it's really disappointing. And secondly, the fact that people like me and others have criticized her has caused AOC to follow up with things like this. Google is free. If you're saying I voted for military funding, you're lying. Receipts attached. Drag me for my positions all you want, but lying about them doesn't make you part of the left. If you believe neo-Nazis are welcome and operating in good faith, you can have them. I don't know what to say about this. Nobody thinks you voted for the bill. We all know you voted against the broader defense appropriations bill, just like most Democrats voted against the defense appropriations bill. Again, even Richie Torres voted against the defense appropriations bill. What we're saying is, why didn't you stand with your progressive colleagues on this issue and at least try in some symbolic way to take money away from Israel? But we now know that it's money that you think is for so-called defensive weapons, which is, again, a massively dangerous and Zionist position that, to my girl Angelica C's26 on Twitch saying, why would AOC fuck up like this? She was moving up. And that is my feeling exactly. It really pains me because I do think that AOC could be the future of the Democratic Party. And that could is very much dependent on how unflinching she can stand for Palestinian human rights. And the one thing that we can do, pretty much the only thing in our power to do, we cannot de-radicalize the citizens of Israel. We cannot, de-radicalize Hamas. We cannot do that. We can withdraw our money. It's the one thing we can do is stop funding it. It's the one thing our legislators, it is the lowest, it is the fucking bar is so low. It is the lowest bar. And so if you cannot clear that hurdle, you cannot clear a Democratic nomination or a groundswell movement to fight oligarchy, right? You have not established yourself as being anti-establishment. You continue to gaslight people. And I say that I would never say that someone is like beyond repair or reproach or that they can't go back. But I'm not going to be saying like, she's a Zionist, that should give up on her. No, man. But I'm scared. I'm worried. You know what I mean? I'm worried. And I don't feel as maybe I once did that she will be the future of the Democratic Party because of this kind of waffling and because sadly, who has maybe gotten into her ear about this kind of stuff. Guys, every day there's a human rights violation happening. I mean, Come on now. Come on now. You got to study the issue. You got to learn more. You got to listen more. Why don't you just fucking read the news? Why don't you just open your fucking Instagram? Why don't you see the death and destruction? You don't need a degree in nothing. This is not a left or right issue. And that is why I do think it's important to actually even symbolically vote, but hopefully symbolically working towards an actual concrete and strategic vote to get U.S. funding out of the Israeli military. I mean, we know that like she openly rejected AIPAC to their face many times. But there are, again, other soft Zionists and liberal Zionists who I think she's, we know she took that anti-Semitism vote that effectively conflated anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and that was a terrible vote. And whatever whatever game she thinks she's playing, meaning if she thinks this is the way to clinch either a Senate nom or a presidential nom, it's not. It's not going to be the way. It's not going to be the way.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do